I used to think camping was peaceful, the kind of thing people did to escape stress, to breathe fresh air, to reset their mind, but that was before the night. I learned how fast the woods can turn against you, how fast nature can feel alive in a way that wants you gone, and how fast the dark can swallow sound like it is hungry. It happened last fall when my cousin Mark convinced me to go on a weekend trip deep inside Red Hollow Forest, a place locals talked about with this strange hesitation, like they knew something we did not. The kind of place where stories get whispered, not told out loud. The kind of place older folks say, "You should never stay after sunset," but we were young and stupid, and we laughed at every warning the first night. Everything felt normal. We set up our tent near a clearing, cooked cheap food over the fire, and told each other stories until the flames burned low. I remember thinking the woods felt too quiet, like the silence had weight, like something was listening. But I ignored it, blaming my nerves on the darkness and the way the trees blocked the moon around midnight. Mark shook my shoulder, telling me he heard footsteps outside the tent, slow, deliberate, not like an animal sniffing around, but like a person. Pacing back and forth, I held my breath, waiting, listening, and then I heard it, to the slow crunch of leaves, the careful shift of weight, like someone taking their time, circling us, completely silent between each step, like they wanted us to know. Whispered, maybe a hiker, maybe a hunter, but the nearest trail was miles away, and no hiker moves like that, no. One steps like they are testing the ground with each foot. We stayed frozen inside the tent, watching the fabric ripple slightly, like someone was brushing their hand against it, like they were mapping out our shape. Then the footsteps stopped right at Mark's side, only thin nylon separating him from whatever stood outside. I watched the shadow darken the tent wall, a tall shape, too tall. Shoulders hunched at a strange angle, like the bones were wrong. Then the shape leaned closer and exhaled a long, broken breath, like someone learning how to breathe for the first time. We stayed silent for almost an hour, until the noises faded into the deeper part of the woods. When we finally stepped out to check, there were no footprints, no marks, nothing. Just flattened leaves, and the overwhelming feeling that we were being watched from the tree line. Mark thought leaving the fire burning brighter would keep animals away, but I knew it was not an animal, and the fire felt pointless, like the thing in the woods did not care about light or heat. When we tried to sleep again, something strange happened. The air inside the tent got colder, like the temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and then we heard whispering just outside, two voices, but they were not speaking words. The sounds were broken, stretched thin, like imitation speech, like someone trying to copy human language. And failing, the whispering moved around the tent in a slow circle, one voice dragging behind the other, like it was limping. Mark grabbed my arm so tight my shoulder hurt. He mouthed, "Stay still," even though I could barely see him in the dark. The whispering grew louder, until it felt like it was inside the tent, not outside, like the voices were coming from the walls. Then the tent shook hard, like someone grabbed the fabric and pulled it up an inch, like they were checking if we would come out. We did not move, not even when a long, thin finger pressed against the nylon from the outside, slowly tracing down the surface like it was drawing the shape of my spine. It dragged almost the entire length of the tent, stopping at the floor, then tapping twice like it approved of what it found. Then everything went quiet. Completely silent. So silent my heartbeat felt like thunder in my ears. Mark mouthed, "We should run," but there was no way I was leaving the tent when something that tall moved like it did out there. By the time the sun started rising, the whisper stopped, the cold faded, and the forest looked normal again, but nothing in my chest felt normal. We decided to pack up the moment the sun touched the clearing. We told ourselves we were done camping for the year, but before leaving we noticed something near the tree line. Deep marks in the dirt, like claw drags, except they were long, smooth, even like fingers, not claws, like something had rested its weight in the soil, crouching, watching, waiting. As we hiked out, Mark swore he heard footsteps following us, sometimes close, sometimes far, but always matching our pace. And when we turned around to look, the trees were empty still, but the silence felt alive, like the woods were holding their breath for us to make one wrong move. 3 miles later, when we finally reached the road, Mark checked his phone, and the screen showed something that made my stomach fall. A picture had been taken. Sometime around 3:30 in the morning, a picture. From inside our tent, a picture of us sleeping, and in the corner of the frame, barely visible, a long hand was reaching toward my face, pale, bent, and wrong. We never went back to Red Hollow Forest, and we never camped again. The second story happened deep inside Blackridge Forest, the kind of place where GPS signals disappear, and the silence feels too heavy to be natural. I went there with my cousin Mason last September, planning to camp for 2 nights and hike through the ridge, but the moment we set up our tent, I felt it again, that quiet pressure in the air, like something was watching us from behind the trees. I convinced myself it was just nerves, but even the birds sounded like they had moved somewhere else. As the sun fell and the forest turned into a maze of shadows that night, we sat near the fire. Mason kept glancing behind him like he expected something to step out of the tree line. He wasn't the type to get scared easily, so seeing him tense made my chest feel tight. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he kept hearing something breathing near the tent. When he was unpacking something that didn't sound like any animal we knew, I laughed it off, but deep down I knew exactly what he meant. I had heard something to a slow, shallow breathing, like a person trying not to be noticed, but I didn't want to admit it out loud. Around 1 a.m., the wind died completely, the fire crackled low, and everything else froze. No rustling, no owls, no insects. Just dead silence. I woke up inside the tent to the faintest whispering, not words, just a soft tone like someone humming through their teeth. I thought Mason was awake, but when I turned he was completely still, his face twisted in some sort of strained expression like he was fighting something in a dream. I nudged him, but he wouldn't wake up. His breathing was shallow and uneven. Then I heard it again right outside our tent, a dragging sound, slow and heavy, like someone pulling their feet through the dirt. I held my breath. It stopped right at the entrance of our tent, and the whispering grew louder, more desperate, more human. I reached for the flashlight, but before I could turn it on, the tent wall behind me pressed inward, as if a hand was pushing from the outside. I froze. The pressure slid down the tent and stopped exactly where my shoulder was resting. The fabric trembled like fingertips were tapping it. Gently I whispered Mason's name over and over, shaking him until he finally jerked awake. He asked what was happening, but before I could answer, something circled our tent, dragging its feet, making that awful low breathing sound again. Mason grabbed his pocket knife and mouthed to me not to make a sound, but whatever was outside already knew we were awake, because the next moment it pushed against the door, zipper bulging, the cloth inward like it was trying to come inside. Mason held the knife ready while I held the flashlight pointed at the entrance. The zipper twitched, slowly sliding an inch downward, then another inch, like invisible fingers were trying to pull it open. I yelled and hit the light on at full power. The beam shot through the tent fabric, and something outside moved fast, way too fast. The dragging sound turned into frantic shuffling, then total silence. We didn't sleep. We sat there until sunrise. When it finally felt safe to crawl out, the ground around our tent was covered in strange tracks, not footprints, not paw prints, just long, uneven grooves, like something had crawled around, dragging its limbs in circles. The zipper of our tent had deep scratch marks, as if someone had been picking at it for hours. We packed everything and left without speaking, both of us checking over our shoulders every few seconds. Halfway through the trail, Mason stopped dead, staring into the trees. I followed his eyes and saw it to about 50 feet away. Something pale standing behind a tree, the shape of a person but too thin, too long, its head tilted too far to the side like it didn't know how to stand like a human. We blinked once, and it slipped behind the tree without a sound. We ran the rest of the trail, leaving our gear behind, and I swear, even now, sometimes at night, I still hear that same shallow breathing outside my window, like whatever followed us down the mountain never really